Whenever you're ready, Zoe.
Today I brought in two identical t-shirts. One of them costs $12.80 and the other costs $10. Now this is a simple question, but how many of you would choose the better deal? And okay, what if I told you that the cheaper option was produced in an unethical sweatshop in the heart of Bangladesh, while the more expensive option was created by a socially conscious designer in Brooklyn? It becomes an entirely different story, doesn't it? Today, I'll be sharing two ways in which we can make more informed, ethical decisions when shopping. Mindful consumerism involves the deliberate understanding of the effects our purchases have on the world. It's important that we all practice mindful consumerism because what you buy ultimately has a great effect on real people and our world, not to mention our wallets. I'm credible to talk about this because I've studied consumer behavior and even e-commerce for extensions through my fashion blog. With both of these experiences in mind, I chose to research mindful consumerism in order to determine how we could bring a little awareness back into the marketplace. By the end of this speech, my hope is that you'll begin to consciously examine what you buy through avoiding mindless consumption and seeking creative alternatives. First, let's look at one fundamental way we can influence production practices. Mindless consumption is really the source of many issues in the apparel industry. When was the last time you bought a sweater and thought, who made this? It's easy to assume if we see smiling sales associates in the mall that the company is putting good into the world. But it's this line of thought that allows mega companies to thrive with minimal pushback from their customers. And ultimately, this is where mindless consumption begins. College is pretty branded, if you haven't noticed. Most of us wear name brand athleisure as our daily uniforms. An August 2017 study in Business Insider revealed that Nike is the brand of choice among 15,000 millennials. And the problem with this is that another Business Insider report from 2013 noted that Nike Incorporated has been the face of the infamous sweatshop model of production since the early 90s, when anti-sweatshop movements broke out across the globe. To give you an idea of what these movements were fighting for, in 2015, researchers under the Social Movement Studies Journal noted that anti-sweatshop movements focus on the international apparel industry and the ways in which they consistently abuse workers' rights. And it's this consistency that suggests a structural flaw. And we fix structural flaws by challenging the norms which shape those institutions. That's a lot of talk, so what can we actually do about this? Let's look back at the Nike case. In December 2016, the Washington Post covered a sit-in in Georgetown that resulted in a revision of Nike's licensing contract with the university. This new agreement meant that Nike had to take more accountability for their factories. And an August 2017 follow-up from the Washington Post revealed that the new contract has been successful. The Workers' Rights Consortium carries out random inspections that are ultimately leading to improvement in Nike's factories, at least the ones producing Georgetown apparel. This illustrates the power that we have as college students to demand transparency in a market that we essentially control. Now, some people have the concern that if we implement more ethical production practices, it would ultimately be more expensive. And this is true, but most people don't mind. A study we published in the Cambridge Journal of Economics in 2004 found that the average consumer is willing to pay 28% more on a $10 item if they could be assured it was made under good working conditions. So now that we've talked about who is making our clothes and why mindful consumerism is important, let's look at another way we can create a more ethical marketplace. First, let's observe how difficult it is to find ethical brands. All 25 of these brands were found by a 2011 International Textile and Leather Workers Report to be enforcing absurd working conditions. These violations included forced overtime, hazardous work environments, and not a single one of these factories paid the determined living wage for the country of its production. With a marketplace so saturated by these giant names, you can imagine how difficult it is to avoid unethical brands altogether. This is where creative alternatives come into play. A really common alternative is shopping secondhand. Traditionally, our minds go to the Goodwill model, in which we walk into the store, sort through messy racks, and ultimately walk away empty-handed. But online thrift stores like ThredUp and user-generated sites like Poshmark are challenging this by offering selections of secondhand items with the ease of virtual shopping. ThredUp, a company who really pioneers this digital thrifting model, released a 2016 report that noted if 1 in every 100 American households shopped resale, we would save $1.4 billion. And that's enough for each household to afford 2 years of college. At this point, you should understand how avoiding mindless consumption and seeking creative alternatives will ultimately have a great effect on the consumer-driven marketplace. If we all add a little consciousness back into our shopping trips, by asking who made this, and ultimately, what are my alternatives, then our chances of seeing a real shift in the production of goods dramatically increases. Now, knowing what you know, would you still choose the more unethically produced t-shirt? That was so long.